The scanner measured power levels. It exploded when the human touched it. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The research station orbited a dying red dwarf, its gleaming silver hull reflecting the last gasps of stellar radiation into the void. Inside, researcher Valen of the Korath Collective stared at his newest acquisition with trembling fingers, a device that promised to change everything they knew about biological energy signatures. Valen was a specimen of his species, tall and willowy with skin that shimmered like polished jade under the station's artificial lighting. His four eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern across his elongated face, blinked in sequential rhythm as he calibrated the scanner for the 100th time that cycle. The Korath were known throughout the galactic community as master biotechnicians, beings who could measure and quantify the life force of any organism down to the most minute fluctuation. Their scanners were legendary, capable of detecting power signatures from living beings across vast distances, measuring everything from metabolic output to neural activity to something the Korath called essence resonance. The device before him was the culmination of 300 standard years of research. The Biological Power Index Scanner, or BPIS as it had been formally designated, represented the cutting edge of Korath technology. It was a sleek cylinder roughly the length of Valen's forearm, covered in intricate patterns that glowed with soft blue light. At one end, a crystalline lens focused the scanning beam. At the other, a holographic display would project the results in stunning detail. The device could theoretically measure power levels up to 1 million units, a range that encompassed every known species in the galaxy with comfortable room to spare. The highest recorded measurement ever taken belonged to a Dravix warlord, a massive being who stood 3 meters tall and could crush steel with his bare hands. That particular specimen had registered at 47,000 units, a reading so extraordinary that it had made headlines across a dozen systems. Most sapient species registered somewhere between 500 and 5,000 units. The Korath themselves, despite their advanced biotechnology, typically measured between 2,000 and 3,000 units. Valen had spent the last 6 cycles testing the scanner on every available subject aboard the research station. His colleague Myrax, a fellow Korath with expertise in xenobiology, had registered at 2,800 units. The station's security chief, a burly Torvian named Grath, had hit an impressive 12,000 units, which was typical for his warrior species. Even the station's pet, a small furry creature from the Deneb system, had registered a respectable 30 units. But today, Valen had a new subject. A human. The human had arrived on a supply shuttle 2 cycles ago, part of a cultural exchange program that the Galactic Council had been pushing for the last standard year. Humanity was a relatively new species to the galactic stage, having achieved faster than light travel only 50 standard years prior. They hailed from a yellow dwarf system they called Sol, from the 3rd planet, a world they named Earth. Initial contact had been peaceful, even cordial, and humanity had been quick to establish diplomatic relations with the major powers. The human in question was a maintenance technician named Nathan Brooks. He was an unremarkable specimen by human standards, or so Valen had been told. Roughly 1.8 meters tall, with brown hair that fell across his forehead and blue eyes that seemed to constantly observe everything around him. He wore the standard gray jumpsuit that all maintenance personnel aboard the station were issued, with the name Brooks stitched above the left breast pocket. His hands were calloused, his forearms marked with small scars that spoke of years working with tools and machinery. When Valen had approached Nathan about participating in the scanning experiment, the human had agreed with an easy smile and a casual shrug. Humans, Valen had learned, were remarkably agreeable when it came to scientific studies. They seemed to possess an innate curiosity that matched or even exceeded that of the Korath, though their methods were decidedly more hands-on and less theoretical. Now, as Nathan walked into the laboratory, Valen felt a flutter of anticipation in his thoracic cavity. This would be the first comprehensive biological power scan of a human ever conducted. The data would be invaluable, a cornerstone of xenobiological research for generations to come. Valen had already prepared 17 different papers he would publish based on the results, regardless of what those results might be. Nathan smiled as he entered, raising one hand in that peculiar human greeting they called a wave. His demeanor was relaxed, completely at ease despite being in a laboratory full of alien technology. Valen had noticed this about humans in general during his limited interactions with them. They seemed remarkably unflappable, adapting to strange situations with an ease that some species found unnerving. "Hello there, Doc," Nathan said, his voice carrying that slight raspy quality that seemed common to human males. His command of the common galactic language was impressive, though he spoke it with an accent that Valen found oddly pleasant. "So this is the famous scanner I've been hearing about." Valen's translator device, a small implant behind his primary ear, converted Nathan's words into the clicking and harmonics of the Karath language. Valen responded, and his own words were translated back for Nathan's benefit. "Indeed, this is the Biological Power Index scanner. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this study. I assure you, the process is completely non-invasive and painless. The scanner merely measures the energy signature that all living beings naturally emit." Nathan nodded, his hands sliding into the pockets of his jumpsuit. "Sounds good to me. I've got about an hour before I need to get back to fixing the air recycler in Section 7, so we've got plenty of time. What do you need me to do?" Valen gestured to a raised platform in the center of the laboratory. "If you would simply stand there, I will conduct several scans from various angles. The entire process should take no more than 20 standard minutes." Nathan walked to the platform with that easy, rolling gait that humans employed. Valen had studied human locomotion, fascinated by the way they balanced on only two legs with no tail for counterbalance. It seemed precarious, yet humans moved with surprising grace and efficiency. Nathan stepped onto the platform, turned to face Valen, and spread his arms slightly away from his body. "Like this?" Nathan asked. "Perfect," Valen replied, his fingers already dancing across the scanner's control interface. The device hummed to life, its internal crystals resonating at frequencies that made Valen's sensitive, hearing membranes vibrate sympathetically. The blue light intensified, casting strange shadows across the laboratory walls. Valen aimed the scanner at Nathan, centering the human in the targeting reticle that appeared on his heads-up display. "Beginning scan," Valen announced, more for the recording than for Nathan's benefit. The scanner emitted a soft pulse of energy, invisible to most species but perceptible to Valen as a subtle distortion in the air. The beam washed over Nathan, who stood perfectly still, his expression one of mild curiosity. Data began streaming into Valen's display, numbers and graphs and complex equations that mapped the human's biological energy signature. At first, everything appeared normal. Valen could see Nathan's cardiovascular system, the steady rhythm of his heart pumping blood through an impressive network of vessels. He could measure the electrical impulses firing through Nathan's nervous system, the chemical reactions occurring in his digestive tract, the thermal energy radiating from his body. All of it was fascinating from a xenobiological perspective, but nothing that seemed extraordinary. The scanner registered Nathan's baseline power level at 5,200 units. Valen's eyes widened in surprise. That was higher than expected. Humans were supposed to be relatively fragile, at least according to the preliminary reports that had circulated through the scientific community. They had no natural armor, no venomous fangs, no ability to regenerate lost limbs. They were considered a middle-tier species in terms of physical capabilities, roughly equivalent to the Karath themselves. Yet here was Nathan, a maintenance technician who by all accounts led a sedentary life fixing machinery, registering a power level that exceeded the galactic average by a comfortable margin. "Interesting," Valen muttered, making a note in his data log. "Very interesting. Everything okay?" Nathan asked, his tone casual. Yes, everything is proceeding normally. Please remain still for the secondary scan." Valen adjusted the scanner's settings, increasing its sensitivity and expanding its frequency range. He wanted to probe deeper, to understand the nature of this elevated power reading. Perhaps humans simply had a higher baseline energy signature than anticipated. Perhaps their metabolism operated at a higher efficiency than other species. Whatever the explanation, Valen was determined to find it. The second scan revealed even more surprising data. Nathan's cellular structure was remarkably dense, his muscle fibers packed with mitochondria that produced energy at an accelerated rate. His bone structure, while appearing delicate compared to some of the more robust species, was actually a marvel of engineering, combining flexibility with surprising strength. His brain, that wrinkled mass of neural tissue housed in his skull, was consuming nearly 20% of his total energy output, a ratio that seemed almost wasteful until Valen realized how much processing power it must provide. The scanner's readout climbed to 5,800 units. Valen made another note. The power level was fluctuating, increasing slightly as the scan continued. This was not unheard of. Some species showed elevated readings when under observation, a stress response that elevated metabolic functions. But Nathan didn't appear stressed. His heart rate was steady, his breathing calm and regular, his facial expression neutral. Valen decided to conduct a third scan, this time incorporating the Essence Resonance Matrix, a feature that measured not just physical energy, but something more abstract, something the Karath called the life force. It was a controversial feature, as not all species believed in such metaphysical concepts, but the Karath had centuries of data supporting its existence. The scanner emitted a different tone this time, a harmonic frequency that resonated with the fundamental vibrations of living matter. Valen watched as the Essence Resonance Matrix activated, its readings appearing as a separate stream of data on his display. And that's when things began to get strange. The power reading jumped to 7,000 units, then 8,000, then 9,000. The numbers continued climbing, accelerating rather than stabilizing. Valen's 4 eyes blinked in asynchronous confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. The scanner was designed to reach a stable reading within seconds. Fluctuations were normal, but this was something else entirely. "Nathan, have you been feeling well lately?" Valen asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Nathan looked at him, a slight furrow appearing between his eyebrows. "Yeah, I feel fine." "Why? Is something wrong with your scanner?" "I am not certain. The readings are unusual. Please continue to remain still." The power level hit 12,000 units and kept climbing. Valen checked the scanner's calibration, wondering if there was a malfunction. But no, all systems showed green. The device was functioning perfectly. It was simply measuring something it had never encountered before. 15,000 units. 20,000 units. 25,000 units. Valen felt a chill run through his circulatory system. Nathan had just exceeded the legendary Dravix Warlord's reading, and the numbers showed no signs of stopping. How was this possible? Nathan was a maintenance technician, not a warrior or an athlete or a soldier. He spent his days repairing air recyclers and fixing electrical conduits. There was nothing about him that suggested he should be radiating this much power. 30,000 units. 40,000 units. 50,000 units. The scanner began to vibrate in Valen's hands. A high-pitched whine emanated from its core, a sound that set Valen's hearing membranes on edge. Warning indicators began flashing on his display, cautioning that the device was approaching maximum operational parameters. "Nathan, I think we should stop," Valen said, his voice tight with concern. But Nathan wasn't looking at Valen anymore. His attention had shifted to the scanner itself, his blue eyes focusing on the device with sudden interest. There was something in his expression, a flicker of recognition, as if he had just noticed something important. "Is that thing supposed to be shaking like that?" Nathan asked. Before Valen could respond, the power reading hit 100,000 units. The scanner's vibration intensified, becoming violent enough that Valen struggled to maintain his grip. The whine had escalated to a shriek, a piercing sound that filled the laboratory and sent other researchers scrambling for the exits. Sparks began erupting from the scanner's casing, small arcs of electricity that danced across its surface in chaotic patterns. Nathan stepped off the platform, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "Hey, Doc, I think you should probably put that down." But Valen was transfixed by the display, watching in horrified fascination as the numbers continued their impossible climb. 150,000 units. 200,000 units. 250,000 units. The scanner was now radiating enough heat that Valen could feel it through his insulated skin, could smell the acrid scent of overheating circuitry. Nathan began walking toward him, crossing the laboratory floor in long strides. "Seriously, that thing is about to go critical." Put it down and step back. Valen tried to release the scanner, but his fingers wouldn't respond. Whether it was shock or scientific fascination or simple disbelief, he couldn't say. He could only watch as the readings approached levels that shouldn't exist, that couldn't exist. 500,000 units. 750,000 units. 900,000 units. The scanner's casing began to crack, fracture lines spreading across its surface like a spider's web. The blue glow that had been so soft and inviting now blazed with the intensity of a small star, casting harsh shadows across the laboratory. Valen's eyes ached from the brightness, but he couldn't look away. Nathan reached him, moving with surprising speed. The human's hand shot out, fingers closing around the scanner, and in that instant when Nathan's skin made contact with the device, everything changed. The power reading hit 1 million units and immediately blew past it. 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million. The numbers became meaningless, climbing so fast that Valen's enhanced perception could barely track them. The scanner began to glow white-hot, its internal crystals overloading, its sophisticated circuitry melting into slag. Nathan yanked the scanner from Valen's hands, his expression one of alarm. He turned, clearly intending to throw the device away from them, but he never got the chance. The scanner exploded. The detonation was not particularly large as explosions went, roughly equivalent to a standard fragmentation grenade. But in the confined space of the laboratory, it was devastating. The shockwave threw both Nathan and Valen backward, sending them tumbling across the floor. Shrapnel peppered the walls, embedding itself in equipment and furniture. The crystalline lens, that beautiful focal point of Korath engineering, shattered into a million glittering pieces that rained down like lethal snow. Valen hit the wall hard enough to knock the breath from his respiratory sacs. His vision swam, all four eyes struggling to focus. His hearing membranes rang with a persistent high-pitched tone that drowned out all other sound. Pain radiated through his body, sharp and immediate. He tasted blood, that coppery flavor that indicated internal damage. Through the haze of pain and confusion, Valen managed to orient himself. The laboratory was in ruins. Equipment lay smashed and sparking. Fires had broken out in 3 separate locations, small blazes that filled the air with acrid smoke. The platform where Nathan had stood was scorched black, the metal twisted and warped by extreme heat. And Nathan? Where was Nathan? Valen's eyes found him, and what he saw made no sense. The human was standing in the center of the blast radius, smoke rising from his jumpsuit. His hair was disheveled, his face smudged with soot, and his arms were covered in small cuts where shrapnel had found flesh. But he was standing. Not just standing, but apparently unhurt beyond those superficial wounds. He was examining his hands, turning them over as if checking for damage, his expression one of mild annoyance rather than pain or shock. Nathan looked up, met Valen's gaze, and said something that Valen's ringing ears couldn't quite catch. The human walked toward him, his movements fluid and unimpaired, no sign of the injuries that should have hospitalized him, if not killed him outright. Valen tried to speak, but his voice came out as a weak croak. Nathan knelt beside him, those blue eyes suddenly intense with concern. "Hey, Doc, stay with me. You're going to be okay. Just breathe. Help is coming." Valen could hear alarms now, distant and muffled but growing louder. The station's emergency response team would be here soon. Good. That was good. He needed medical attention. His body was going into shock, his systems shutting down in response to the trauma. Nathan's hands moved over him, checking for injuries with surprising competence. The human pulled off his own jumpsuit, wadding it up and pressing it against Valen's side, where something sharp had lodged itself between his ribs. The pressure was painful, but Valen understood it was necessary to slow the bleeding. Other beings began arriving. Valen recognized Myrax, his colleague, her face pale with fear. Grath, the security chief, his massive frame filling the doorway. Medical technicians with their kits and scanners. They swarmed around Valen, their voices overlapping, their hands gentle as they began emergency treatment. Through it all, Nathan remained beside him, that improvised compress held firmly in place until the medics could take over. The human's face was calm, his movements sure, as if explosions and injuries were simply part of his daily routine. Valen felt consciousness slipping away, his vision narrowing to a tunnel. But even as darkness claimed him, one thought burned bright in his mind. What in the name of the ancestors were humans? Valen woke in the medical bay, his body cocooned in a regeneration pod that hummed softly as it worked to repair his injuries. His four eyes opened one at a time, adjusting to the dim lighting. Pain was present but distant, held at bay by a cocktail of medications flowing through his system. A face appeared above him. Myrax, her jade-colored skin marked with lines of worry. "Valen, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice filtered through the pod's communication system. "Yes," Valen managed to say, his voice weak but functional. "How long?" "2 cycles. You sustained significant internal injuries. The doctors say you are fortunate to be alive." "The scanner," Valen said, memories flooding back. It exploded. Myrax's expression grew somber. "Yes, we have been investigating the incident. The device suffered a catastrophic overload. The internal crystals were subjected to energy levels far beyond their design specifications." "The human," Valen said. "Nathan, is he?" "He is fine." Myrax's tone carried a note of disbelief. "Remarkably fine, considering he was at the center of the explosion. Minor cuts and bruises, all of which he treated himself. He refused extensive medical evaluation, insisted he had work to do. He returned to his maintenance duties within 3 standard hours of the incident." Valen tried to sit up, but the pod's restraints held him in place. "That's impossible. The blast should have killed him. At minimum, he should have sustained severe burns, broken bones, internal hemorrhaging. That is what the medical staff said as well. But the human appears unharmed." Myrax paused, her eyes blinking in that nervous pattern that indicated she was about to say something she found difficult. "Valen, before the scanner exploded, what readings did you record?" "It went past 1 million units," Valen said. "Far past. The last coherent reading I remember seeing was approaching 3 million, but the scanner was already failing by that point. The actual level could have been much higher." Myrax's skin tone shifted, paling to a lighter shade of jade. "That should not be possible. No biological organism can generate that much energy. The readings must have been corrupted somehow. I calibrated that scanner myself," Valen said, his voice gaining strength as his scientific pride asserted itself. "Multiple times. It was functioning perfectly until the human touched it." "You think the human caused the overload?" "I know he did. The moment his skin made contact with the scanner, the readings went exponential. It was as if his mere touch completed some kind of circuit, allowing the full extent of his energy signature to be measured." Myrax was silent for a long moment, processing this information. "If what you are saying is true, then humans are not what we thought they were. They are not middle tier. They are something else entirely. We need to conduct more tests," Valen said. "We need to understand what we are dealing with." Myrax's expression turned apologetic. "The Galactic Council has suspended all biological scanning experiments involving humans until a full investigation of the incident can be completed. There are concerns about safety protocols, about whether our technology is even capable of measuring human energy signatures without risk of catastrophic failure." Valen felt frustration building in his thoracic cavity. "This is a unique opportunity for xenobiological research. We cannot let bureaucratic concerns stop us from." "Someone nearly died, Valen. You nearly died. The Council's caution is warranted." Valen knew she was right, but it didn't make his frustration any less acute. He had come so close to understanding something fundamental about humanity, and now that understanding was being yanked away by safety regulations and institutional cowardice. The medical pod chimed, indicating that its current cycle was complete. The restraints released, and Valen sat up slowly, testing his newly repaired body. Everything seemed to function correctly, though he felt weak and unsteady. Myrax helped him out of the pod, supporting him as he found his balance. "When can I return to work?" Valen asked. "The doctors recommend at least 5 more cycles of rest and observation. Your injuries were severe." But Valen was not listening. His mind was already racing ahead, planning his next steps. If he couldn't scan humans officially, perhaps he could study them through observation. Perhaps he could learn something about their nature through indirect means. Over the following cycles, Valen did exactly that. As he recovered, he spent his time watching Nathan Brooks. He observed the human as he worked, noting the efficiency of his movements, the problem-solving skills he displayed when faced with malfunctioning equipment. He watched Nathan interact with other crew members, noting his easy humor, his casual confidence, his apparent lack of fear in situations that made other species nervous. What Valen discovered was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Nathan was not exceptional by human standards. This became clear when Valen accessed personnel files and compared Nathan's physical assessments to other humans on record. Nathan was average height for a human male, average weight, average strength scores. His medical history showed no genetic enhancements, no cybernetic augmentations, no signs of military training or athletic conditioning beyond what the files called basic fitness maintenance. If Nathan was average, what did that mean for humanity as a species? Valen began researching Earth, diving into every database and report he could access. What he found painted a picture of a world that should not have produced a sapient species capable of space travel. Earth was classified as a death world. The designation was not official, not something the Galactic Council would ever formally acknowledge, but it was whispered among xenobiologists and exoecologists. A death world was a planet where the environmental conditions were so harsh, the evolutionary pressures so intense, that survival required extreme adaptations. Earth qualified on almost every metric. The gravity was 1.0 standard, which might not sound impressive until Valen realized that most spacefaring species evolved on worlds with 0.7 to 0.85 standard gravity. Humans had evolved in an environment that subjected them to significantly higher gravitational stress their entire lives. Their muscles, their bones, their cardiovascular systems, all of it had been forged under conditions that would cripple most galactic species. The atmosphere was a volatile mix of nitrogen and oxygen, with oxygen comprising 21% of the total. Oxygen was a highly reactive gas, toxic to many species in such concentrations. Humans breathed it constantly, their biology not just tolerant of it, but dependent on it. Their cellular respiration was based on oxidative processes that would literally burn through the tissues of species adapted to less aggressive atmospheres. The temperature range was extreme. Humans had colonized regions of their planet that experienced temperatures from well below freezing to well above the boiling point of water. They thrived in deserts and tundras, in rainforests and Arctic wastes. Their ability to regulate body temperature was remarkable, allowing them to maintain a stable core temperature across environmental conditions that would kill most species through thermal shock. And then there was Earth's biosphere, a nightmare of predators and parasites and pathogens that had been locked in evolutionary warfare for billions of years. Humans had not evolved as apex predators. They had been prey animals who became hunters through intelligence and tool use. They carried genetic memories of being stalked by creatures with fangs and claws, of hiding from predators that could crush their fragile bodies with ease. But they had survived. More than survived. They had conquered their world, dominated its ecosystems, and eventually reached for the stars. Valen found records of human history, accounts of their wars and conflicts. What he read made his blood run cold. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. They had developed weapons of staggering destructive power, devices that could level cities or poison entire regions. They had created and deployed biological weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons. They had fought wars that killed millions, that ravaged continents, that threatened their very existence as a species. And yet they had never destroyed themselves. Somehow, they had always pulled back from the brink, found ways to cooperate despite their differences. The same species that could create weapons of mass destruction could also create art and music and literature of transcendent beauty. The same hands that could strangle an enemy could heal the sick and comfort the dying. Humans were a paradox, a species of contradictions that should not exist. Valen compiled his findings into a report, a comprehensive analysis of human biology and culture. He knew it was incomplete, that he was working with limited data and making assumptions that might prove incorrect. But he also knew that what he had discovered was important, perhaps critically so. He presented his findings to the station's senior staff at a meeting convened by the station commander, a venerable Karath named Cedron. Cedron was old by any standard, his jade skin marked with age spots and his movements slow but deliberate. He listened to Valen's presentation in silence, his four eyes never leaving the data displays that filled the conference room. When Valen finished, Cedron was quiet for a long moment before speaking. You are suggesting that humans are significantly more powerful than our initial assessments indicated. Not suggesting, Valen said. Stating, the biological power reading I recorded before the scanner failed was 3 million units. Even accounting for possible equipment malfunction, even if we assume the reading was inflated by a factor of 10, we are still looking at a species that operates at 300,000 units baseline. That is 6 times more powerful than the Dravix warlord, and Nathan Brooks is by all accounts an average human. The implications are troubling, Myrax added. If all humans carry this level of power, then they are potentially the most physically capable species in the known galaxy. Graf, the security chief, spoke up. His voice was a deep rumble that carried authority. We should not assume hostile intent. Humans have been peaceful in their dealings with the galactic community. They have honored all treaties and agreements. There is no indication that they mean us harm. I am not suggesting they are hostile, Valen said. I am suggesting that we have fundamentally misunderstood them. We have treated them as equals when in fact they may be far superior to us in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. Superior is a loaded term, Cedron said, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. Let us not allow fear to cloud our judgment. What do you propose, Valen? I propose that we conduct further studies. Not with scanning equipment, which clearly cannot handle their energy signatures, but through observation and interaction. We need to understand human capabilities, their limits, their potential. We need this knowledge not to fear them, but to work with them effectively. Cedron considered this, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the table's surface. Very well, but we proceed carefully. No experiments that could endanger human subjects or station personnel. Observation only. Agreed. Valen nodded, though part of him chafed at the restrictions. Still, it was better than nothing. The meeting adjourned, and Valen returned to his quarters, his mind racing with possibilities. He had been given permission to study humans, and he intended to make the most of it. Over the following cycles, Valen became something of a shadow to Nathan Brooks. He observed the human during work hours, noting how Nathan approached problems, how he interacted with machinery, how he responded to stress and unexpected complications. What Valen discovered was that Nathan possessed an almost instinctive understanding of mechanical systems. He could diagnose problems with minimal information, could improvise repairs with whatever materials were at hand, could adapt technology designed for other species to work within human parameters. It was not just intelligence, though Nathan was clearly smart. It was something more intuitive, a feel for how things worked that went beyond formal training. Valen also noticed that Nathan was remarkably strong. Oh, the human did not go around demonstrating feats of strength or challenging others to tests of physical prowess. But Valen saw him lift components that should have required mechanical assistance, saw him manipulate tools with force that bent metal and sheared bolts. What was more remarkable was that Nathan seemed unaware of his own strength, treated it as normal and unremarkable. One cycle, Valen observed Nathan in the station's cargo bay. A shipment of supplies had arrived. Heavy containers that normally required anti-gravity sleds for transport. But the sleds were all in use elsewhere, and Nathan needed to move 3 containers to the storage area. The human studied the containers for a moment, then shrugged and simply picked one up. He lifted it chest high, adjusting his grip, then walked across the cargo bay with it. The container had to weigh at least 200 kilograms, yet Nathan carried it as if it were a minor inconvenience. He made 3 trips, moving all the containers in less time than it would have taken to fetch and program an anti-gravity sled. Valen checked the cargo manifests later. The containers had each weighed 230 kilograms. Nathan had moved nearly 700 kilograms of cargo through sheer muscle power, and his only complaint afterward was that he needed to stretch his back. Another cycle, Valen observed Nathan responding to an emergency. A plasma conduit had ruptured in one of the lower levels, filling a corridor with superheated gas that measured over 300 degrees standard temperature. The automated safety systems had sealed the area, but there were crew members trapped inside who needed evacuation. Nathan arrived with the emergency response team, but while the others were still donning protective suits rated for extreme temperatures, Nathan simply grabbed a breather mask and went in. The protective suits required several minutes to properly seal and calibrate. Nathan couldn't wait that long. Valen watched through monitoring systems as Nathan entered the corridor, the temperature readings on his suit barely registering compared to the ambient heat. The human moved quickly but calmly, locating the trapped crew members, two Venari researchers who had been overcome by the heat. Nathan picked them both up, one over each shoulder, and carried them out of the danger zone. When he emerged, his jumpsuit was singed and his exposed skin was red from heat exposure, but he was otherwise unharmed. The medical team checked him over and found nothing that required treatment beyond some topical cooling gel. Nathan had walked into an environment that should have caused severe burns at minimum and possibly death, had stayed there for nearly 3 standard minutes, and had emerged with injuries equivalent to a mild sunburn. The Venari researchers he had saved both required several cycles in regeneration pods. Valen compiled these observations, adding them to his growing database of human capabilities. A picture was emerging, but it was not one that made logical sense. Humans seemed to violate numerous biological principles that the Karath considered fundamental. They operated at energy levels that should require massive caloric intake, yet they ate relatively modest amounts. They demonstrated strength that should require muscle mass equivalent to that of species twice their size, yet they maintained relatively compact frames. They endured environmental conditions that should cause systemic failures, yet they treated these conditions as minor inconveniences. It was as if humans existed in a state of constant potential energy, their bodies somehow containing power that exceeded what their physical forms should be capable of storing or expressing. Valen decided he needed to speak with Nathan directly, to ask the questions that observation alone could not answer. He found the human in the maintenance workshop, elbow deep in the guts of an atmospheric processor. Nathan looked up as Valen entered, a smile crossing his face. "Hey, document. How are you feeling? All healed up from the explosion?" "Yes, thank you. The regeneration therapy was quite effective." Valen paused, gathering his thoughts. "Nathan, I wanted to apologize for the incident with the scanner. I did not anticipate that it would fail so catastrophically." Nathan waved a hand dismissively, the gesture sending a spatter of lubricant across his jumpsuit. "Don't worry about it. These things happen. You're okay. I'm okay. That's what matters." "I have been observing you," Valen said, then quickly added, "for research purposes. I hope you do not find that intrusive." Nathan laughed, a sound that was surprisingly pleasant. "I figured someone was keeping tabs on me after the scanner exploded. It's cool. I've got nothing to hide." "I have questions," Valen said. "About humans. About your capabilities. I hope you will be willing to answer them." "Sure," Nathan said, turning his attention back to the processor. "Shoot." The readings from the scanner, before it failed, indicated that you possess an energy signature far exceeding anything we have encountered in the galactic community. Yet you claim to be average by human standards. Is this accurate? Nathan was quiet for a moment, his hands continuing to work on the processor. "I mean, yeah, I guess I'm pretty average. Nothing special about me. There are plenty of humans who are stronger, faster, smarter. I'm just a maintenance guy. On your world, Earth, humans lived as prey animals for much of their evolutionary history. Is this correct?" Nathan nodded. "Yeah, we weren't always at the top of the food chain. There were things that hunted us. Big cats, bears, other predators. We survived by being smart, by working together, by making tools. And yet you evolved to become the dominant species on your planet. We're persistent, I'll give us that." Nathan pulled a component from the processor, examined it, then reached for a replacement part. "We don't give up easily. When something knocks us down, we get back up. The gravity on Earth is 1.0 standard. This is significantly higher than most species experience. Do you find the gravity aboard this station comfortable?" Nathan shrugged. "It's a little light, actually. I have to be careful not to overdo it when I'm moving stuff around. It's easy to forget that things weigh less here and put too much force into lifting something. And the temperature range you endure on Earth, the atmospheric composition, the exposure to radiation from your yellow sun, none of this is considered harsh by human standards. It's just normal." Nathan fitted the replacement part into the processor, his movements precise despite the bulky gloves he wore. I mean, yeah, Earth can be rough. We've got deserts and ice caps and jungles. But humans live everywhere. We adapt. Valen watched the human work, his mind churning through the implications. Do humans understand how unusual you are? In the context of the galactic community, I mean. Nathan paused, looking up at Valen with an expression that was difficult to read. I think we're starting to figure it out. The first time a human arm wrestler competed against a Dravix, people noticed. The first time human soldiers went through the Galactic Defense Force training program, people noticed. We don't talk about it much, but yeah, we know we're different. Are you not concerned about how other species might react to this knowledge? Nathan's expression turned serious. Should I be? Valen chose his words carefully. Historically, when a species discovers that another species is significantly more powerful, it often leads to fear. And fear can lead to conflict. Nathan set down his tools, giving Valen his full attention. Doc, let me tell you something about humans. We've spent our entire history being afraid. Afraid of the dark, afraid of predators, afraid of each other. Fear is part of our DNA. But we learned a long time ago that fear doesn't have to control us. We learned to face what scares us, to find common ground, to build bridges instead of walls. That is admirable, Valen said. But not all species share that philosophy. Then we'll have to teach them. Nathan's tone was calm, but there was an underlying strength to it that sent a shiver through Valen's body. Look, I get it. We're new to the galactic stage. We're different in ways that probably freak people out. But we didn't come to space looking for a fight. We came looking for friends, for knowledge, for new experiences. If other species want to make an issue of our capabilities, then we'll deal with that when it comes. But we're not going to hide what we are or apologize for it. Valen felt a chill of recognition. Nathan was not boasting or threatening. He was simply stating facts as he understood them. And the confidence in his voice was the kind that came from deep certainty, from a species that had faced extinction-level threats and survived, that had climbed from prey to apex predator through sheer determination. The conversation stayed with Valen long after he left the workshop. He realized that his fear of humans was not based on any hostile action they had taken, but on the sheer potential they represented. Humans were powerful in ways that the galaxy had not encountered before, and power without understanding was dangerous. But Nathan had given him something to consider. Humans had power, yes, but they also had wisdom born from millennia of managing that power. They understood the dangers of unchecked aggression, had learned through painful experience the cost of conflict. Perhaps that was what truly made them exceptional. Not their strength, but their restraint. Not their capacity for violence, but their preference for peace. Valen decided to include this perspective in his final report. Humans were indeed powerful, perhaps the most powerful species in the galaxy. But they were also fundamentally peaceful, seeking cooperation rather than domination. The key to successful integration of humanity into the galactic community was not to fear them, but to trust them, to treat them as partners rather than threats. He submitted his report to the station commander and copied it to the Korath Biological Research Council. It would be distributed throughout the scientific community, studied and debated, and possibly rejected. But Valen had said what he believed needed to be said. 2 cycles later, he received a response from the council. They wanted him to present his findings at the annual Xenobiological Symposium, a gathering of the galaxy's foremost researchers. It was an honor and an opportunity to shape the narrative around humanity before fear and misinformation took root. Valen accepted. The symposium was held on the Korath homeworld, a planet of stunning beauty with towering crystal formations and vast oceans that shimmered with bioluminescent life. The conference center was an architectural marvel, a structure that seemed to grow from the living rock, its walls embedded with the same crystals that defined the Korath aesthetic. Valen stood in the preparation area, reviewing his presentation one final time. He was nervous, more so than he had been in cycles. The implications of his research were profound, and he knew that not all attendees would receive his conclusions favorably. A hand touched his shoulder, causing him to jump. He turned to find Nathan standing there, wearing not his usual jumpsuit, but a formal suit in dark blue that the humans called a dress uniform. The human smiled, that easy expression that seemed to be his default state. "Nathan, "What are you doing here?" Valen asked, surprised. The Galactic Council thought it would be good to have a human representative at the symposium. To answer questions and provide perspective. When they asked for a volunteer, I figured it might as well be me. Did you not have maintenance duties to attend to? They gave me leave. Apparently, interstellar diplomacy trumps fixing air recyclers. Nathan's smile widened. Besides, I wanted to hear what you had to say about us. I'm curious how we look from the outside. Valen felt his anxiety ratchet up another notch. Having Nathan in the audience meant his words would be subject to immediate verification or correction by a primary source. There would be no room for embellishment or speculation. I hope my assessment is accurate, Valen said. I'm sure it'll be fine, Nathan replied. You strike me as the thorough type. The call came for Valen to take the stage. He walked through the corridors leading to the main auditorium, his heart's beating in rapid succession. The doors opened, and he stepped into a vast space filled with beings from dozens of species. Karath, of course, but also Venari and Torvian and Dravix and countless others. Thousands of eyes turned to him, expecting revelations and insights. Valen walked to the podium, activated the holographic display, and began his presentation. He started with the basics, explaining how he had come to study humans, the incident with the scanner, the readings that had defied all expectations. He showed the data, unfiltered and comprehensive, letting the numbers speak for themselves. A murmur ran through the audience as they processed the implications of a species with energy signatures in the millions of units. Then Valen moved to his observational research, sharing footage of Nathan lifting heavy cargo, entering superheated environments, performing tasks that would have required multiple specialists from other species. More murmurs, louder this time, tinged with disbelief and concern. Finally, Valen reached his conclusions. He explained his theory that humans were not just physically powerful, but had evolved in an environment that had forged them into something unique. He talked about Earth as a death world, about the evolutionary pressures that had shaped humanity, about the paradox of a species that was simultaneously capable of great violence and great compassion. And then he said something that surprised even himself. We have approached the integration of humanity into the galactic community with caution, treating them as newcomers who must be guided and instructed in the ways of civilization. But I submit that this approach is fundamentally flawed. Humans do not need our guidance. They do not require our instruction. What they need is our respect and our partnership. The auditorium had gone silent, every being hanging on his words. Humans are powerful, yes, more powerful than we initially understood. But they are also wise. They have faced challenges that would have destroyed lesser species and emerged stronger. They have fought wars among themselves and learned the value of peace. They have developed weapons that could annihilate their world and chosen not to use them. They are not a threat to the galactic community. They are an asset, perhaps the greatest asset we have encountered in generations. Valen paused, letting his words sink in. We should not fear humans. We should learn from them. And most importantly, we should stand with them as equals. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then someone began to clap. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the auditorium. Valen felt a wave of relief wash over him. His message had been received, at least by some. The question and answer session that followed was intense. Many attendees wanted clarification on specific points, wanted to challenge his conclusions, or offer alternative interpretations. Valen answered as best he could, always returning to the core of his argument. Humans were different, yes, but difference was not synonymous with danger. Near the end of the session, a Dravix stood, his massive frame dominating the space around him. His voice was a bass rumble that carried authority. You claim that humans are more powerful than my species, yet you base this on limited observation and a single failed scanning attempt. How can you be certain that your conclusions are accurate rather than the result of equipment malfunction? Before Valen could answer, Nathan stood from his seat near the back of the auditorium. The human's voice carried clearly, calm and measured. If I may, he said, I think I can provide clarification. All eyes turned to Nathan. The human walked down the aisle toward the stage, his movements unhurried. When he reached the front, he turned to face the audience. My name is Nathan Brooks. I'm the human that researcher Valen has been studying. I want to confirm that everything he has said is accurate to the best of my knowledge. Humans are physically capable in ways that exceed most galactic species. We evolved in a high-gravity environment with a volatile atmosphere and a biosphere that was constantly trying to kill us. We are, by necessity, resilient. Nathan paused, his blue eyes scanning the assembled beings. But here's what I want you to understand. We don't consider ourselves superior. We don't think our physical capabilities make us better than anyone else. What we have is simply the result of where we came from, the same as your capabilities are the result of your evolutionary paths. We respect those differences. We celebrate them. And we hope that you can do the same for us. The Draviks who had asked the question nodded slowly. Your words are well spoken, but many will fear what you represent. How do you propose to address this fear? Nathan's expression turned thoughtful. Fear is natural. I get that. But fear can be overcome through familiarity. Work with us. Train with us. Compete with us if you want. You'll find that we're not monsters or conquerors. We're just people trying to make our way in a very big galaxy. And we could use friends to do that with. The Draviks sat down, apparently satisfied. Other questions followed, but the tone had shifted. What had started as skepticism had become curiosity, even cautious acceptance. When the session finally ended, Valen found himself surrounded by colleagues and researchers, all eager to discuss his findings. Nathan stood off to the side, chatting with a group of Venari scientists who seemed fascinated by his casual descriptions of Earth's ecology. Hours later, as the crowds thinned and the conference center began to empty, Valen found Nathan on an observation deck overlooking the Karath homeworld's crystalline landscape. Thank you, Valen said, joining the human at the railing. Your words today may have changed the course of how humanity is perceived in the galaxy. Nathan shrugged, his characteristic gesture. I just told the truth. That's all anyone can do. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the setting sun painted the crystals in shades of orange and purple. Do you think humans will be accepted? Valen asked. Eventually, Nathan said. It'll take time. Some species will embrace us quickly, others will need convincing. But we're patient. We've got nowhere else to go, so we might as well make it work. Your confidence is remarkable. Nathan smiled. It's not confidence. It's stubbornness. Humans are really, really stubborn. When we decide we want something, we don't stop until we get it. And what we want is to be part of this galactic community. So that's what we'll do. I believe you, Valen said, and he meant it. The cycles following the symposium brought significant changes to the research station. The Galactic Council, influenced by Valen's presentation and Nathan's testimony, officially reclassified humans from newcomer species to established partner species. It was a designation that carried significant weight, granting humanity full voting rights in council matters and opening up new avenues for collaboration and trade. More humans began arriving at the station, specialists in various fields who had been waiting for clearance to work in galactic facilities. Valen met several of them, each unique in personality and background, but all sharing that same underlying quality that he had identified in Nathan. That quiet strength, that easy confidence, that willingness to face challenges head-on. One of the new arrivals was a human named Lauren Bennett, a xenobiologist like Valen himself. She was tall for a human female, with long dark hair pulled back in a practical style and green eyes that seemed to notice everything. Valen found himself working with her on a collaborative project studying the metabolic processes of various galactic species. Lauren was brilliant, her insights cutting through complex problems with a clarity that impressed even the senior Karath researchers. But what struck Valen most was her approach to the work. Where Karath scientists tended to be methodical and cautious, building knowledge slowly through careful experimentation, Lauren was bold and intuitive. She would make logical leaps that seemed reckless until they proved correct, would suggest experiments that violated conventional wisdom until they yielded groundbreaking results. One cycle, as they reviewed data from their latest experiment, Valen voiced his observation. You take risks that no Karath researcher would consider, he said. Lauren looked up from her display, a slight smile on her face. Is that a criticism? An observation. You seem unafraid of failure. Failure is just data, Lauren said. Every experiment that doesn't work tells you something valuable. The real failure would be not trying because you're afraid of being wrong. This is a very human perspective. Probably. Lauren leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms above her head in a gesture that highlighted the efficiency of human musculature. You know, back on Earth, we have a saying. Fortune favors the bold. It means that sometimes you have to take chances, have to risk failure, in order to achieve something great. The Karath have a similar saying, Valen said. Caution preserves life. Lauren laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Both can be true at the same time. You need caution to avoid stupid mistakes, but you also need boldness to make progress. It's about finding the right balance. Valen considered this. Perhaps that was another key to understanding humans. They existed in a state of dynamic balance, cautious enough to survive, but bold enough to thrive. It was a precarious position, but one they seemed to navigate with remarkable success. As cycles turned into months, the research station transformed. What had once been a primarily Karath facility became truly multicultural, with humans integrating seamlessly into every department. The maintenance teams that Nathan had been part of now included 3 more humans, and the efficiency of repairs and upgrades had increased noticeably. The medical bay had human doctors working alongside Venari physicians, bringing new perspectives on treatment and recovery. Even the security force had welcomed human members, though Grath the security chief had grumbled that their hand-to-hand combat training was unnecessarily aggressive. Valen watched these changes with a sense of satisfaction. His research had contributed to this integration, had helped smooth the path for human acceptance. But he also knew there was more to learn, more to discover about this remarkable species. He continued his observations, now with official sanction and additional resources. The Karath Biological Research Council had approved a comprehensive long-term study of human capabilities, with Valen as the lead researcher. He had a team of assistants, access to advanced equipment that wouldn't explode when exposed to human energy signatures, and most importantly, dozens of human volunteers willing to participate in studies. What emerged from this research was a picture of human biology that was even more impressive than Valen had initially believed. Humans, it turned out, had multiple redundant systems that allowed them to function under conditions that would shut down other species. Their cardiovascular system could reroute blood flow to prioritize critical organs during trauma. Their nervous system could suppress pain signals to allow continued function during injury. Their immune system was a hyperactive war machine that attacked foreign organisms with extreme prejudice, making humans resistant to most galactic pathogens, while simultaneously making them carriers of diseases that could devastate other species. Human bones could repair themselves, actually growing stronger at the breakpoints. Human muscles adapted to stress by increasing in size and power, a process called hypertrophy that allowed them to become stronger through use. Human brains could rewire themselves, forming new neural pathways to compensate for damage or to learn new skills. Even human skin was remarkable, capable of self-repair and serving as both armor and sensor array. But perhaps most remarkable was what Valen came to call the human surge capacity. When faced with extreme danger or stress, humans could temporarily access reserves of strength and speed that exceeded their normal capabilities by factors of 2 or 3. This surge state came at a cost, exhausting the human and sometimes causing injury, but it allowed them to perform feats that seemed impossible. Valen documented cases where humans had lifted vehicles to free trapped individuals, had run at speeds that matched predatory animals, had fought off multiple attackers despite being unarmed. These were not trained warriors or enhanced soldiers. These were ordinary humans pushed into extraordinary situations, and their bodies had responded by breaking past normal limitations. It was as if humans existed in a constant state of self-imposed restraint, their full capabilities locked away until circumstance demanded their release. One particular study involved testing human reaction times under various conditions. Valen and Lauren had designed a series of tests that measured how quickly humans could respond to stimuli, everything from visual cues to physical threats. The human volunteer for this test was a young man named Dylan Rhodes, a communications specialist who had volunteered for the study with enthusiastic curiosity. Dylan was shorter than Nathan, with blonde hair and an easy smile that never seemed to fade. The test began simply enough. Visual stimuli appeared on a screen, and Dylan had to press a button corresponding to the stimulus. His reaction times were fast, averaging around 200 milliseconds, which was respectable but not exceptional by galactic standards. Then Valen introduced unexpected elements. Objects dropped from above, and Dylan had to catch them. His reaction time dropped to 150 milliseconds, his hands moving almost before the object began to fall. Then came the physical threat simulation. Valen had designed a harmless but surprising test where padding arms would swing toward Dylan from random directions. His job was to dodge or deflect them. Dylan's reaction time dropped to under 100 milliseconds. His body moved with fluid grace, ducking and weaving, his hands batting away the padded arms with casual precision. But what was most striking was his expression. He was laughing, clearly enjoying the challenge, treating it like a game rather than a test. When the simulation ended, Dylan was slightly out of breath, but grinning. That was fun. Got anything harder? Valen consulted with Lauren, and they decided to increase the difficulty. More padded arms, faster movements, less warning. They also added a secondary task, requiring Dylan to simultaneously solve simple math problems announced through speakers. Dylan handled it all. He dodged and calculated, his body and mind operating in apparent independence. When an arm came at his head, he ducked without breaking the flow of his verbal response to a math problem. When two arms attacked simultaneously, he deflected one with his left hand and caught the other with his right, all while correctly stating that 47 times 33 equals 1,551. When the test finally ended, Dylan was sweating and breathing hard, but his grin had only widened. Okay, that was actually fun. Can we do it again? Valen looked at the data streaming across his display. Dylan's peak reaction time had dropped to 70 milliseconds, and his accuracy on both physical and mental tasks had remained above 90% throughout. It was a performance that would have been exceptional for a species evolved for combat. For a communications specialist who spent most of his time sitting at a console, it was extraordinary. How did you do that? Valen asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Dylan shrugged, that universal human gesture. I don't know. I just did. It's not that hard once you get into the rhythm of it. Your species astonishes me, Valen said. We're just wired differently, I guess, Dylan replied. Comes from having to avoid being eaten for a few million years. Lauren, who had been monitoring the test, spoke up. You know what I think it is? I think humans are optimized for crisis. Our ancestors lived in a world where danger was constant, where you had to be ready to fight or flee at any moment. That shaped our biology, made us really good at responding to threats. The downside is that we kind of suck at sitting still. This explained much, Valen realized. Human restlessness, their need for stimulation and challenge, their tendency to seek out risk even when safety was available. They were a species built for adversity, and in its absence, they became uncomfortable. The research continued for months, each study revealing new facets of human capability. Valen tested their endurance, watching in amazement as human volunteers ran for hours without stopping, their bodies settling into a sustainable rhythm that could theoretically continue indefinitely. He tested their strength, documenting lifting capacities that exceeded predictions based on muscle mass. He tested their sensory acuity, discovering that while humans lacked the specialized senses of some species, they made up for it with remarkable pattern recognition and situational awareness. But perhaps the most revealing study involved pain tolerance. Valen had designed a test that measured how much discomfort various species could endure before requesting cessation. It was a sensitive study, carefully monitored to ensure no permanent harm, but it was necessary to understand the full spectrum of human resilience. The human volunteer was a woman named Claire Dawson, a doctor who understood the medical implications of the study and had volunteered specifically because she wanted to contribute to xenobiological knowledge. The test involved gradually increasing levels of discomfort through carefully controlled stimuli. Temperature extremes, pressure points, mild electrical stimulation. Each level was measured in standard pain units, and most species requested cessation somewhere between 50 and 100 units. Claire endured past 100 units without comment. Past 150. Past 200. Her facial expression showed discomfort, tension around her eyes and mouth, but she didn't ask to stop. Instead, she engaged Valen in conversation, asking about his research, about Karath culture, about his impressions of humanity. At 250 units, Valen stopped the test. This is beyond what we expected. Are you certain you wish to continue? Claire nodded, her jaw tight, but her voice steady. I'm fine. Keep going. The test continued to 300 units. 350. At 400 units, Claire finally spoke. Okay, that's getting pretty uncomfortable. Can we stop here? Valen immediately terminated the test, his hands shaking slightly as he recorded the final measurements. 400 units was more than double what the strongest Dravix warrior had endured. It was a level of pain tolerance that shouldn't be possible for a species without natural armor or pain-suppressing biochemistry. As medical staff checked Claire over, ensuring she had suffered no lasting effects, Valen asked her a question. How did you endure that for so long? Claire considered for a moment. Pain is just a signal, she said. It's your body telling you that something is wrong. But if you know the pain isn't actually causing damage, if you understand that it's temporary and controlled, you can push through it. It's not pleasant, but it's manageable. This is not a common ability among galactic species, Valen said. Maybe not. But humans deal with pain all the time. We injure ourselves, we get sick, we push our bodies to their limits. We learn early on that pain is something you can endure, something you can overcome. It doesn't make us stronger than pain. It just makes us stubborn about not letting it stop us. There was that word again. Stubborn. Valen was beginning to understand that human stubbornness was not just a personality trait, but a survival mechanism, a refusal to give up that had been hardened by millions of years of evolution. The final major study Valen conducted involved human cognitive abilities under stress. He wanted to understand how their mental faculties held up when their bodies were being pushed to their limits. The test involved a complex puzzle-solving exercise performed while the human volunteers ran on treadmills set to increasingly difficult speeds and inclines. The puzzles were challenging, requiring spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, and logical deduction. Most species showed significant cognitive decline when physically exhausted. Humans did not. If anything, some of the volunteers seemed to perform better under physical stress. Their puzzle-solving times improved, their accuracy increased. When Valen asked about this phenomenon, one volunteer explained that physical activity helped clear their mind, helped them focus. This made sense from an evolutionary perspective. If you were being chased by a predator, you needed to think clearly to find an escape route. Your body being exhausted couldn't be allowed to shut down your mental functions. Survival depended on your brain working efficiently even when your body was failing. As Valen compiled all this data into a comprehensive report, he realized that he had only scratched the surface of understanding humanity. Every answer led to new questions. Every study revealed new capabilities. Humans were not just physically powerful. They were cognitively resilient, emotionally complex, and socially sophisticated. They were a species that had evolved to overcome any obstacle, to adapt to any environment, to persist despite any hardship. And now they were part of the galactic community. Valen presented his final report to the Karath Biological Research Council, a document that ran to over 3,000 pages and included data from hundreds of tests and observations. The council reviewed it over the course of several cycles, then issued a formal statement. Humanity was to be classified as a premier species, a designation reserved for civilizations that showed exceptional capabilities across multiple domains. It was the highest classification the Karath could bestow, and it came with significant privileges and responsibilities. The news spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Some species celebrated, viewing humanity's elevation as a positive development. Others expressed concern, worried about the implications of such a powerful species gaining influence in galactic affairs. But the classification stood, backed by indisputable scientific data. Nathan, who had remained on the research station throughout Valen's studies, took the news with characteristic calm. Premier species, huh? That sounds fancy. It is a significant honor, Valen said. It means that humanity will have a greater voice in galactic governance, will be looked to for leadership in matters of importance. Nathan scratched his head, looking uncomfortable. I'm not sure humans are ready for that kind of responsibility. We're still figuring out how to get along with each other, let alone other species. That humility is precisely why humanity deserves the designation, Valance said. You do not seek power for its own sake. You approach challenges with caution tempered by courage. These are the qualities of true leadership. Nathan smiled. You give us too much credit, document. But I appreciate the sentiment. Time would tell if Valen's confidence was justified. But as he watched Nathan walk away, returning to his maintenance duties despite the galaxy-changing recognition of his species, Valen felt certain that humanity would rise to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. Because that was what humans did. They persisted. They adapted. They overcame. And now, they would do it on a galactic stage. The cycles following humanity's reclassification brought profound changes to the galactic community. Humans began taking leadership roles in various councils and committees. Human scientists collaborated with researchers from dozens of species, bringing their unique perspectives to problems that had confounded others for generations. Human engineers designed spacecraft and stations that incorporated innovations no one had considered. Human diplomats navigated complex political situations with a combination of empathy and pragmatism that proved remarkably effective. But there were also tensions. Not all species were comfortable with humanity's rapid ascent. Some viewed it as unearned, based on physical capabilities rather than cultural or intellectual achievements. Others worried that humans would become aggressive, would use their power to dominate rather than cooperate. These tensions came to a head when a dispute arose between the Torvian Empire and the Venari Collective over resource rights to a mineral-rich asteroid field. The dispute had been simmering for years, occasionally flaring into small-scale conflicts that the Galactic Council had struggled to mediate. The Council asked humanity to participate in the mediation to bring a fresh perspective to the problem. The human representative chosen was a woman named Emily Parker, a diplomat with extensive experience in conflict resolution. Emily approached the mediation with a strategy that surprised everyone. Instead of focusing on the legal or economic aspects of the dispute, she focused on the emotional and cultural dimensions. She met separately with Torvian and Venari leaders, listening to their concerns, understanding their perspectives, finding the underlying needs that the dispute represented. Then she proposed a solution that neither side had considered. Instead of dividing the asteroid field, humanity would help both species establish a joint operation, with shared responsibilities and shared profits. Humanity would provide the technology and expertise to make the operation viable, would guarantee the security of the arrangement, and would take a small percentage of the profits as compensation for their involvement. It was not a perfect solution. Both the Torvians and Venari had to compromise, had to accept less than they initially demanded. But it was a workable solution, one that turned potential enemies into partners. The mediation was hailed as a triumph of human diplomacy. Emily Parker became something of a celebrity, her approach studied and emulated by diplomats throughout the galaxy. Valen watched these developments with pride and fascination. The humans he had studied, the species he had worked to understand, were now shaping the future of the galactic community. And they were doing it not through force or intimidation, but through cooperation and innovation. One cycle, Valen received a communication from Nathan. The human had left the research station months ago, taking a position with the Galactic Engineering Corps. He was working on a project to construct a new class of deep space research vessels, and he wanted Valen's input on the biological support systems. They met aboard a partially constructed ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed anything currently in the galactic fleet. Nathan greeted him with that familiar, easy smile, looking entirely at home in the zero-gravity construction environment. "Doc, glad you could make it. I want to show you what we're building." They toured the vessel, Nathan explaining the design philosophy. The ship was intended for long-duration missions, potentially spanning years or even decades. It needed to support a multi-species crew in environments ranging from benign to hostile. And it needed to do all this while maintaining high levels of comfort and efficiency. The biological support systems Nathan had designed were revolutionary. They incorporated elements from a dozen different species' life support technologies, integrated in ways that created redundancies and fail-safes unprecedented in galactic engineering. But what impressed Valen most was how much consideration had been given to psychological and social needs. The ship had recreation areas designed for various species preferences. It had medical bays that could treat virtually any injury or illness. It had food production systems that could create meals suited to the dietary requirements of every known sapient species. It even had isolation chambers for species that required periodic solitude, and communal spaces for those that thrived on social interaction. "This is remarkable," Valance said. "You have thought of everything." "We tried to," Nathan replied. "The thing about long-duration missions is that the physical challenges are actually the easy part. It's the psychological and social challenges that break crews. So we focused on making this ship a place where people want to live, not just survive." This is very human thinking. Maybe, but I think it's universal. Everyone wants to feel safe and comfortable. Everyone wants to have their needs met. If we can provide that for a multi-species crew, then we can go anywhere, explore anything. They continued the tour, discussing specific systems and design choices. Nathan's enthusiasm was infectious, his vision compelling. This was not just a ship. It was a statement about what the galactic community could achieve when working together, when combining the best ideas and technologies from all its member species. Near the end of the tour, Valen asked a question that had been on his mind. "Nathan, do you ever regret how much your life has changed? You were a simple maintenance technician, and now you are designing ships that will explore the galaxy." Nathan was quiet for a moment, looking out through a viewport at the stars beyond. "Sometimes," he said finally, "I like being a maintenance tech. It was simple, straightforward. You fixed things and they worked. But this," he gestured at the ship around them, "this matters more. This is about pushing boundaries, about expanding what's possible. And that's something humans have always done, even when it scared us." "Fear is not always a weakness," Valen observed. "No, it's not." Nathan turned to face him. "Fear keeps you careful, keeps you from making stupid mistakes. But you can't let it stop you from moving forward. That's the balance humans try to strike. Be afraid, but do it anyway. This has been your species' approach to joining the galactic community." "Pretty much." Nathan smiled. "We were terrified when we first made contact with alien life. We didn't know if you'd be friendly or hostile, if you'd accept us or reject us. But we reached out anyway, because the alternative was to stay isolated and alone. And that's not who we are." The ship eventually launched, the first of what would become a fleet of deep space research vessels. Valen participated in the maiden voyage, a 6-month journey to survey a distant nebula that showed signs of unusual stellar formation. The crew was diverse, with representatives from 20 different species. There were Koroth researchers like Valen, Venari physicians, Torvian engineers, Dravik security personnel, and of course, humans. Lots of humans, fulfilling roles ranging from command to maintenance to science. What struck Valen during that voyage was how naturally the humans integrated with the rest of the crew. They worked alongside species that were radically different from them, adapting to various communication styles and cultural norms with remarkable fluidity. They mediated disputes, shared their expertise, and contributed to the mission in countless ways, both large and small. But what Valen appreciated most was their willingness to be vulnerable. Humans were powerful, yes, but they didn't use that power to dominate or intimidate. Instead, they used it to protect and support. When a section of the ship suffered a critical failure that exposed part of the crew quarters to hard vacuum, it was a human, a woman named Kayla Vaughn, who donned an emergency suit and physically held the damaged bulkhead in place while repairs were made. She held it for 47 minutes, her muscles straining against forces that should have torn the bulkhead from her grip, until the engineering team could seal the breach. When the crisis was over, Kayla collapsed from exhaustion, her body shaking with fatigue. But she was smiling, relieved that everyone was safe. That was the essence of humanity, Valen realized. Not their strength, but what they chose to do with it. The voyage was a success, yielding data that would keep researchers busy for years. But for Valen, the true value was what he learned about interspecies cooperation, about how different civilizations could work together when united by common purpose. When the ship returned to port, Valen was greeted as a hero of xenobiological research. His work had fundamentally changed how the galaxy understood humanity, had paved the way for unprecedented cooperation between species. Years passed. Valen continued his research, but now with a focus on how different species could complement each other's strengths rather than compete. He published dozens of papers, trained a new generation of researchers, and became one of the most respected voices in the scientific community. Nathan eventually became the chief engineer for the entire deep space exploration program, designing ships that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. He married a Venari scientist named Syria, their union celebrated as a symbol of interspecies harmony. They had children, remarkable beings who carried traits from both species, proving that the future of the galaxy lay in cooperation rather than separation. The research station where it all began became a memorial, preserving the laboratory where the scanner had exploded. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the scorched platform, to learn the story of how one failed experiment had changed everything. Valen retired eventually, his body growing frail with age. On his final cycle, Nathan visited him, now an old man himself with gray streaking his hair. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the viewport of Valen's quarters. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the scanner hadn't exploded?" Nathan asked quietly. Valen's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "I believe it had to explode. Some truths are too large to be measured by conventional means. Humanity could not be quantified by a device. You had to be experienced, understood through relationship rather than data." Nathan smiled. "That's very poetic, Doc. It is also very true." They watched the stars a while longer, two old friends who had helped shape a new era of galactic civilization. An era where power was measured not in units on a scanner, but in the positive impact one species could have on all others. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.